Hello! Welcome to Lenny Plans. I get a lot of questions about the photo printer that I use to print out photos for my planner, and I also see a lot of people asking questions in groups and forums about which printer they should buy. As with most things, there's no simple answer because it completely depends on what you like and what you want your printer to do. I have examples of the two main forms of print technology that we usually see in the planner community. The HP Sprocket uses Zinc Printing and the Selfie Square Q10 and its larger desktop counterpart, the Selfie. They use something called dye diffusion, or sometimes it's called dye sublimation printing. And it's actually quite hard to compare the two directly without exploring the differences in their printing technology because they give you such a different look. So I'll give you a very quick description of the two types of tech, although I'm not a professional in these areas, so it's going to be basic. Just to start off with, the Selfie printers, both this smaller one and also the desktop version, so they use thermal dye sublimation printing, and what that means is that there is dedicated printer paper like this here, which passes through a dedicated ink cartridge. The paper goes through 4 times in order to transfer each color. So it goes through cyan, yellow, magenta, and then a final clear protective layer. The ink is instantly vaporized by heat in order to transfer the image onto the paper. And Canon actually says that photos printed on this type of paper can last up to 100 years if stored correctly. They're also waterproof, and I've tested this out unintentionally when I've gotten my planner wet, and the photos actually hold up really well, unlike pretty much anything else, although my Tomorrow River paper is pretty good, I will say. So the other type that we have is Zinc Printing. And this is like the Canon Ivy, so the Sprocket, your Polaroid, there's a few other options out there. And so, yeah, they use something called zinc printing. So zinc is short for zero ink, which means that the paper itself holds layers of ink color and you don't need separate ink cartridges. So zinc printers use a pressure-based process. It mixes the ink around to produce the image. And this is what gives you, I guess, more of that traditional style of instant prints, like your classic Polaroids. And there's loads of variation in tone depending on the individual device. Not even the individual brand, the individual device can give you different tones. So I've seen 2 different sprockets that come out with slight tone differences. So the difference that I see is that the Sprocket often has a less, or the zinc prints often have a less crisp image, and they give you a really nice vintage feel. They'll usually have some yellow or blue tones. Mine's a little bit different. It comes out with almost like a pink tone. It's really different. Both of these printers, and I can't speak for all of them, but the 2 that I have, they both use the USB micro B charging cable. I found that the Selfie Square holds charge for longer than the Sprocket, although it probably depends on age. I've had the Sprocket for longer. And you know what, the Selfie Square is larger, so I don't know whether that has a bearing on it, whether it holds more charge for that reason. But yeah. So that's some of the key differences in the technology side of things. Both of these have their own phone apps and they sync really well to my phone. The Selfie app allows me to collage multiple images onto one page within the app itself. They've got a feature called an up layout option. And then for the Sprocket, I use a separate collage app called PicFrame. There's tons out there. You can use whichever you like. I just happen to use PicFrame and create that particular image and then print it out using the dedicated Sprocket app. So yeah, I'm going to flick around a little bit today and give you guys some examples of what it looks like to print both within the app and also here on my desk. So I'm going to be flicking around a little bit if you can bear with me today. So jumping into the Selfie app, You can see that it syncs really effectively with my photos, and I've just gone through and chosen a sunrise from New Year's Day. I think that'll be a good comparison in terms of some of the dark and vivid. So there's a few different options you can see here in terms of border and position on the paper and date. You can add frames. I'm not going to have one of those today, but there's a lot of different options. If you want to play with it a little bit or make it a little bit cuter. There are stamps you can add in. I know it's New Year's, I could add in some champagne flutes if I wanted. It does only print on the image. You can see if I slide it down, it doesn't go onto the white paper below. You can add some text as well. Resize it, spin it around, move it all over. You can see it doesn't go onto the white again, it only prints on the image itself. You can draw on it if you want to. I'll do some maybe purple because that's just a random scribble. And you can undo, which is helpful as well. You can add some filters in if you like. So if you do want some more of that vintage feel, if you decide to go with the selfie, but you're looking for more of that, you know, I guess, sepia tone or something like that, you can add that in. And there's some embossing and they call it an overcoat. So you can change your images as well. And it takes you back through that menu again. I'm going to stick with what I already have. And I'm going to press print. It will ask to join the network. That all happens very quickly, as you can see. This is all real time. And it does take a few seconds to link in there, and then it prints. And I'm going to stay on this screen. It is, you know, I guess a little bit of extra time, but it gives you an idea on just how long it actually takes in real life, I think. So I'm going to show you first what it looks like in the app, and then I will show you what it looks like, you know, as the printer is actually printing these different layers, just so that you, I guess, can see both sides of it. So yeah, you can see that it's done the yellow layer and the magenta layer. It's working on the cyan layer at the moment. Then it will do its clear top coat, which is that overcoat where if you want some of the embossing patterns or something like that, just be aware if it does do, like if you do choose the embossing, it makes it almost like a crunching sound, which I have not put on here, so you won't hear it this time around. But yeah, don't be alarmed, that's just part of the process. So here we go, that is how it looks, pushing it out over the out of the machine with the yellow, and then next comes your magenta. It's looking really vivid at this point. Once that cyan layer goes on, it starts to look very true to colour. And then it's just got the protective layer to go. So I think it's about 45 seconds or so in total. So that is what it looks like. So I'm going to choose the same image as we jump across to the Sprocket app. You can see that it's also synced to my iPhone gallery. Because I'm choosing the same image and it was a square, it doesn't fit on the 2x3 inch paper. So I'm just repositioning and resizing that a little bit. I still want to keep it as, I guess, close as possible, just so that it's a decent comparison. And then I just hit print, and you can swipe left if you want to delete it before it starts printing, or I use that function sometimes if I have accidentally hit print twice and not realized. So yeah, that is what it looks like in the app, and I'm going to jump across to the footage of it printing now. So this is quicker. I think it's maybe around 30-35 seconds, something like that. Feel free to check the time on the video. But yeah, so it's slightly quicker, but both are very quick. It's a really amazing option to have at home, I think. So the Sprocket is, I think, slightly quieter, but both are quite loud. And yeah, there you go. That is the image. Okay, so I've shown you guys some footage of me printing these two images here. The selfie print takes about 45 seconds and the Sprocket is around, I want to say 35 seconds, so slightly quicker, but not that significant. They're a pretty tight competition in terms of print time, I think. The quality of print, like as I've said, I think just by nature of the technology, the dye sublimation printing is going to win in terms of quality almost every time, but it does depend on what you're looking for. So, you know, this kind of vintagey feel to it, it's really nice. You know, it has its place just depending on what you're going for. So I'm hoping that even though this is quite a dark print, that you can see some of the difference in color. I notice it particularly in the sky up the top. I think that it's just a little more pink, a little less sort of blue there. And I think the detail in the clouds, I'm not sure if my camera is picking that up, but the detail on the clouds is just a little different as well. One of the other images that I printed out as a comparison, just one that's not so dark, is this picture of my cat Gracie having a little snuggle in bed with me. So I think once again you can kind of see the nature of my Sprocket is that it just has a slight pink tone on what are actually white sheets, and I think that the Selfie picks up that white a little bit more clearly. And even on sort of where the light is hitting her fur on the top of her head, there's a slight pink tone there that just isn't on the Sprocket print, that isn't on the Selfie print. So it's so slight, and really if it doesn't worry you, then, you know, go for whichever feels the simplest to use or the lightest to carry around. In terms of actual comparison of carrying them around, the Sprocket is going to win on that. It is so much more convenient. Weight wise, again, I just don't think there's a comparison. This, like, if you're genuinely looking for something lightweight to carry around, the Sprocket's your go-to. You know, it just depends on what you're after. And it might even depend what you are using as a planner or where you're putting the photos. So for those of you who've seen my channel before, you'll know that I tend to use these. I cut them up into 4x4 and lay them out in my weekly spread. They fit really nicely in the columns of my B6 Wonderland 222, but that might just depend on which planner you're using as well. I can probably show you some examples of like some of the other more common planners too. I do have a couple of examples here, so I'll pull those out and we'll have a little look there as well. Before we do that, I'll just show you super quick the Pick Frame app. You can see on the top right I've chosen 3x4, and you can choose a layout option for that particular paper size. It's great if you want to divide it into smaller options. Just for today, I'm just going to show you 2 landscape size pictures. It's got a lot of similar options in terms of effects and rotating and cropping and things like that. You can choose border size as well, which is great. I often keep the border on because the Sprocket does cut off the edges slightly, but for this one I'm just going to remove the border so you can kind of see that. Yeah, all right, let's jump back across to the planners. Okay, so what I have here are a number of options in terms of collage and print size, and I've got here to compare what they look like size wise, I've got the 3 sizes of the Wonderland 222. I've got the A6, the B6, and I've borrowed my son's A5 so that we can have a look at what they look like in the weekly columns of those. And then I also have the Hobonichi A6, the weeks, the cousin, which is the A5, and then I've got the Jibun Techo Biz as well, just so you can see, I guess, how you might use these printers to kind of fit your photos into your planner the way that I do. So yeah, I generally, like I have said, I won't often print out the whole size, or I might keep it as a collage and stick it in as is if it's all photos of one day, for example. You will have seen me showing you how to do a collage option in PicFrame for the Sprocket, and there's obviously a number of options you could do there as well. So just to start off with, basic size comparison between the two. So the Sprocket will give you, they measure by inch, so it is 2 by 3 inch. And it's actually like, it's almost exactly 3. Hopefully you can see that there. And it is just slightly narrower than the 2. So what that means is you will lose just a tiny little sliver of each of your images. So just bear that in mind when you are thinking about framing them up in the app. The Selfie Square gives you, so the paper in and of itself is, oh, I'm just not good with inches, is 7.15 paper by 8.5 centimeters. The image, and you will have seen in the, when I showed you some of the app footage, that you can change the border size as well. You don't completely use up that paper. What it usually prints on, what they consider to be normal, is actually 6.45 centimeters by 6.45 centimeters, or 6.5, give or take. So yeah, hope that helps. So that is probably worth keeping in mind depending on the size of your columns. So I'm gonna go through, let's do these first, the Hobonichi and the Jibun Techos. Sorry, I'm knocking things all over the place. Might actually also just cut these up for you guys. So these are the 2 sizes that when I have use them more regularly, this is the most common layout that I use, and you can, you know, cut them out with a guillotine. They're straight lines, so that's fairly straightforward. I find them quick enough to just cut out without too much hassle. On this one too, actually I hadn't shown you guys, it's so hard to see. There is, I think you might be able to see it just there in that little highlight. There's a slight embossing, so you can choose some emboss patterns. I honestly don't use that very often because it is really hard to see, but it's kind of cute. And they seem to have a few other options in the art too in terms of color or yeah, putting some extra pattern over the top, whether that be border pattern or that embossing style. Not being too precious here. So these planners are old ones. I'm not using the Hobonichi or the Jibun Techo this year, so I'm showing you planners that are a little bit older, but I guess size wise you can fit them quite comfortably on the page, depending on how you want to lay out. So this is the A6 that we're looking at the moment, the original. If we take, let's see, take these two, these are a good comparison. And look at, you find a monthly. So monthly, it's a little bit big to be using in the A6. So I personally wouldn't use it on a monthly. But yeah, it's quite nice to use it in the A6 in your dailies. In terms of the weeks, I guess if you were going to go full size, you're sort of taking up a lot of space. But for just, I guess, a picture here or there over a couple of days, it fits pretty nicely. So I think it's probably pretty good for the weeks too. Let me see if I've got an unused monthly. Oh, there we go. Once again, I think it's a bit too big for your weeks for the monthly pages, but yeah, for the weekly, definitely a great option. For the cousin, works beautifully. So one print, the quarter size of the Selfie, fits beautifully between those columns. It does cover up your time bar, but like how great is that? Love that so much. The Sprocket, not as much. Like if you were to do it vertically, you could, but it's gonna come over just a little bit, which is fine too. Like that's not too bad to put it between the columns like that as well. So still a really good option. Full size, look, you can depending on what you're doing, and then a full size of the Selfie, maybe not so much. But yeah, cutting it down, the Selfie square would be my pick there. But you know, depends on what you want and what you can afford. In terms of the monthly, once again, the cousin, look at that. It is like spot on one square. That is so cool. Like if you wanted to do a photo a day and track that in your cousin, you know, the selfie square is a beautiful print for that. Look, I mean, you could even if you wanted to take out 4 days at a time, I don't know. Choice is yours. So the Sprocket, full size, if you were gonna do like even a quarter, like it's sort of slightly odd dimensions, but hey, like that could work. I have to say, I just have to do this. I'm so satisfied by this. Like it's putting a photo a day in. Isn't that great? So cute. I got the Selfie square after I stopped using the cousin, so I was aware that it fit, but I don't think I've seen it quite so neatly. That's awesome. So yeah, that is something that you could do. The Jibun Techo, it's got such narrow columns, and here's where it actually probably is worth having the Sprocket. So I know that I've done a full print that way, but can you see how well one half of that would fit inside one of the Jibun Techo columns? Like that's great. It does take up a fair chunk of the like the time bar, but yeah, like I just think that's so great how well that fits. So yeah, like whether you wanted to then do it down the bottom and you could do four prints to a page, and you would have 4 days worth. So you know, if you've got the Jibun Techo or a B6 Slim size planner, that might be a really great option for you. In terms of the monthly, here, I think you can probably see once again it fits beautifully because it's almost the same width. So you could probably do like it would eat into it in terms of that vertical size, but depending on how you wanted to play it, could do that. The thing with the Sprocket, because you're not using the dedicated collage with the app, it does mean that I guess you have a little bit more flexibility. So yeah, so that could be an option for you as well. So yeah, that is the Hobonichi and the Jibun Techos sizes. So when it comes to the Wonderland 222, A6 column, let me find, sorry, the Selfie square is just slightly over. I would say it fits. I would probably still do that, but it just depends on how pedantic you want to be. So yeah, that could be an option. In terms of, I guess, using half the half of the sprocket, that actually I think fits really beautifully. So that would actually, half of that would actually fit and still give you the time bar down the side. So that I think is probably a really good option there. If you're looking at the full size by comparison, it takes up a lot of space. And in terms of the monthly, this is the A6. I just don't think it's that practical, really. You'd have to cut it down. So yeah, that is the A6. Excuse me, throwing things around again. The B6, which is my go-to, and what you will have seen if you have seen me plan. I love that I get just a little border around the prints. It fits beautifully in that spot. And I do on occasion, here's an example. So sometimes I'll print like 2 to a page. So this is horizontal, and it fits like across pretty well. But I'll sometimes do like a portrait print as well, and I can actually get a really decent sized photo in those columns. So yeah, that's why I like the Selfie. For these, your midway point, so I'm actually going to use this print. But yeah, size wise, that's 1/4. So yeah, look, it would work. But once again, it just depends on what you're going for. What are you going to use it for? Here is a monthly in the Hobonichi, the Wonderland 222 B6 size. So these are a little large for that. This is probably not quite the right dimensions for that either. You would have to cut it down, which is fine. Let's see. Last but not least is the A5 Wonderland 222. The A5s are always going to be a lot more forgiving because they have more space. So I guess to do the larger size comparison, you could actually fit, like if you were to trim off the bottom, you could fit that pretty nicely across. That's just over 1 column size, so like if you wanted to trim it down, you could almost fit an entire print in of the Sprocket. Here's my, I actually almost feel like the Selfie Square 1/4 is a little bit too small for the A5. Look, it's still cute and it fits. But yeah, I do wonder about sort of using, do you know what, look at that. So that is the Sprocket half of a page. Look how beautifully that fits. So you know what, if you're going for that size, that might be a really good option if you're not too worried about that color contrast. And then looking at the monthly, that fits pretty well depending on how you want to do it. That's probably a little big. Doing the 1/4 size is probably, look, it's pretty good. Just depends on how you want to use it. So I guess that's a very quick size comparison. of the two printers compared to some of the common planners that we have in the community at the moment. And yeah, so I guess just really depends on what you need. For me personally, like I said, I have both. I've had the Sprocket for a lot longer. Personally, I prefer the Selfie Square. It's working for me at the moment in terms of the basic size columns and the quality of the print. I just, like I said to you before, just prefer the clear photo and the white tone that comes from the Selfie, but depends on what you're after. Alright, well, I hope that you have found that helpful or interesting. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them down below. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day, whatever you're doing. I'll see you next time. Bye.